Hey everyone, good morning. Lisa Martin here with you. This is Druva's LinkedIn Live show In Cloud We Trust. We're going to be talking about cyber resilient backup as a service today, giving you an MSP's perspective. From MSP Arrosoft, I have two guests here with me. Vincent Chang is here, it's CEO, and it's CIO Suresh Suseendran. Guys, great to have you on LinkedIn Live today.
Lisa, thanks for having us.
Yep. Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for having us.
And Vincent, I think you're our best dressed guest ever with the tie. Awesome. Way to bring it home today. We're going to spend
Thanks.
about 15 minutes with you guys in the audience. We're going to give you an overview, three topics of Aerosoft, who they are, what they do. You're then going to learn about legacy backup applications, the components and the risks as well. And then we'll wrap things up with why Aerosoft moved to Druva. Feel free to pop questions in. We would love to get to those live if we've got time. We'd love your participation. All right, Vincent, let's kick it off. Talk to the
Sure.
audience about Aerosoft, who you guys are, what you do, and also what differentiates you.
Sure, Lisa. Thanks again for having us. So, Aerosol, we've been around the industry for about 8 years now. So, Suresh and I started the company about 8 years ago. Our primary focus is to provide data protections solutions to our partners and MSPs for their customers. So, we have this large channel ecosystem that we provide these type of consulting solutions to their customers. So, if I look at my business today, what differentiates us is um, if we know how to protect, we should know the purpose of protection is for the purpose of the restore. So over the last 8 years, fortunately, unfortunately, uh, our firm was involved with a lot of the large global ransomware recovery efforts. So over the last 8 years, we have recovered roughly about 60,000 plus servers for various different clients. Obviously, these clients were lucky enough that we were able to found a good last known backup and was able to help them. There were some clients that their entire environment was encrypted, that which we couldn't help. So again, so we provide backup as a service, DR as a service, ransomware protection as a service, and also the recovery services for our partner ecosystems customers.
Excellent. We're going to dig into that more, especially on the ransomware side. I want to say hi back to, we've got a nice global audience here, some folks from India, some folks from down under, and I do see one person saying, what is this session about? This is about cyber resilient backup as a service from Druva and Aerosoft, Raj. So thanks for asking that question. All right, guys, let's jump into our second topic here, legacy backup applications, components, risks, challenges, things that you guys have experienced. Vincent, if you give us the CEO's perspective, what are some of those top challenges of legacy solutions?
So because the nature of our business, we have to understand and provide support for various different data protection technology out there in the market today. I'm not going to call out any names, but some of those legacy application does work, right? But it requires um, huge amount of initial investment from the infrastructure perspective. So if you look at any of the legacy application that's been around the market for quite some time, it's always this three-tier architecture. It's the database that consists of the catalog information. It's the data mover that's actually doing the backup process. And then it's the repository, whether that's the old school tape library or some of the new disk, whether that's on-prem or in the cloud. So these are some of the three-tier architecture components, which we see it as a risk from both the protection side, which might be costly in the beginning, initial investment, and also Suresh, I think you're going to talk a little bit about the from a technology perspective, what are some of the vulnerable components as well.
Yeah,
Sure,
Suresh,
sure.
go ahead and walk us through that.
Yep. Thank you, Vincent. Thanks for having us, Lisa, here. So there are two components, right? When we talk about backups, there is a legacy backup infrastructure and application, and the next gen. And any backup, legacy backup applications, right, as mentioned, touched upon, it's a three-tier architecture, which is basically the brain of the component, which is the configuration database. Then comes the data movers, which moves the data from one location to the backup target. And the last but not least, the world has adopted to something called deduplication, right, where the data needs to be stored efficiently. So you only store the change rate, right? So those are the three vital components. When we talk about vulnerabilities, right, and also to prevent the customer getting into a risk from ransomware attack perspective, the main thing that is the infrastructure is thick provision in any legacy application, if you say. And then the most vulnerable components are the operating system. In any kind of ransomware attack or malware, the first target for the attack is the operating system. If the operating system of the backup infrastructure server, let's say it's on-premise or in the cloud, which are thick provisioned, if that goes down, then it drags you down along with the configuration database, which is the brain, and then also the deduplication information, and last but not least, the disk target back where the actual backup information is stored. So those three components, which are very vital for any legacy data protection platforms, are the most vulnerable components in case of considering a legacy data protection platform. If those are not available, then the customer is underwater, right? They wouldn't know, hey, can I even restore the data? What is my last good known copy to begin with, right? How can I even consider if I can perform a restore? Because there's nothing there. The operating system is dead, right? There's no vital information for me to even go and look at what I can perform a restore. So that's a huge risk.
Break down a few more of those business risks. You talked about those vulnerable components, Suresh, but from a business perspective, I'm just seeing red flags everywhere. What are some of the top risks that you see organizations facing if they're in this situation?
Absolutely, Lisa. Like when you talk about the business risks, right? When any legacy application is getting deployed, there's multiple teams getting involved, right? Beginning from the operating system. Then comes the security aspect of the house. Hey, is this operating system tight and all the bells and whistles have been enabled, right? If that component has been taken down, right, you are dead, right? That's a huge risk because there's nothing for me to make it function. When the OS is not there, I cannot query the configuration database to see, do I have a backup? Do I have a relationship with my client? When did I run the last backup, right? Then comes the next steps. Okay, I have a backup target. I can perform a restore. But the brain is dead, right? So relating it to the synology, if a person is brain dead, that's it. There's nothing can function. So operating system, the configuration database, the deduplication information, if those are not available to perform a recovery, you're completely dead. So that's a huge risk.
It's potentially business ending risk. And one of the things, Suresh, sticking with you, I want you to walk us through the ransomware recovery process at a high level. I know this is at least a seven-step process. And one of the things we talked a lot about in the last couple of years is the massive rise in ransomware. In fact, when I'm often talking with Druva customers, it's not a matter of if we get hit, it's when. So do me a favor, Suresh, just give us a high level of the steps involved in a recovery process and why it takes as long as it takes.
Sure, sure. Let's consider a scenario, right? If ransomware attacks, they target everything in the data center floor, beginning from tier 0 all the way to development servers, which means your source is down, there is nothing functional. When a recovery scenario happens, there are multiple teams involved, right? Beginning from the server team, the operating system, the security, and then there's a new team that comes into the play, which is called as the forensic team, the EDR. So the first step is like identify the baseline. Okay, we got hit with ransomware. Now we need to secure our perimeter. So the customer builds a war room, secures a control environment where the infrastructure needs to be rebuilt from ground zero. That's the humongous task. Then once that is built, the operating system needs to be deployed. Once it is deployed, the forensic team needs to validate, is the operating system completely locked down? So it's much more secure and controlled than before because there was loopholes. That's why it got impacted. Once it is locked down, then the backup team gets involved where we install the backup application. Now we go through the steps of identifying, do I have a last good known copy of the configuration database? If so, then I recover it. Once that is recovered, then I need to bring it on, connect the dots, where I connect the disk target, the data movers, go through the inventory, send it back to the end user saying, hey, this is the last good known copy. You tell me which one I need to perform the restore. Let's say that's sorted out. Again, we don't restore it directly to the production. We'll perform the restore to a controlled environment where the forensic team will come in, validate the data because we can't believe or depend saying the data that I restore is the same copy. Once it is restored, then becomes a repetitive process. So if you tie all these together, from ground zero, from hour zero, it takes a minimum of 3 business days to 5 business days before an operational regular restore can happen, because I need to rebuild the infrastructure, strengthen the OS, identify if the configuration database is the same, connect the dots, initiate a test restore, release it to the forensic team. They need to tighten the security on the data, then give a green flag saying, hey, Aerosoft team, go ahead and start the recovery. So that's a minimum of 3 to 5 business days. That's a long recovery process.
That is a long recovery process, and you think, businesses being hampered significantly. You think of some of the things as consumers as one of the things I think that's dwindled during the pandemic is patience, brand reputation, customer experience. Those are all critical elements that can be negatively affected during this long recovery process. So Suresh, I'm sure you have an example of a customer for which you've done this. Can you share that with us really quickly, and then we'll bring Vincent back into the conversation.
Yep. This is a great segue, Lisa. So I don't want to name any customer here. This is one of the largest stick manufacturing company. Mid to late last year, they got impacted by ransomware. Almost everything, as a ransomware attack happens, everything in their data center was completely encrypted. Fortunately, they had one backup target which was not encrypted, right? So the same process we have to meticulously plan and go together and bring the infrastructure from ground up. So we have to rebuild the infrastructure for the backup lay of the land. And then once the lay of the land has been built up, we had to release it back to the end user. And then in the control environment where they validate the data set, then it took a longer time for them to even classify, hey, what they want to restore, from which date, right? There's a huge going back and forth. And then we identify the data set, perform the recovery, and release to the control environment, and then started the repetitive process of restoring. No backups after that. Again, you got to listen. It's only recovery process, right? So even if something goes wrong during that period of time, right, they don't have any baseline after that. So we are only restoring the data. So that minimum took us minimum 5 business days, because there's a lot of going back and forth. The forensic team, this is a real time ransomware recovery scenario. So during that time, the customer could not respond to any of their end user requirements. They're out of business for 5 days. They probably lost several $1 million, right? That's a huge, huge risk for them.
Absolutely. So let's go into our third and final topic, Vincent. You talked to us about Aerosoft. You both talked to us about the challenges, those components that are vulnerable for legacy backup applications. So Vincent, I got to ask you, what were you using before, and why is Aerosoft now all in on Druva?
So obviously, we talked about the components of the legacy applications. It does provides a wide range of support for the application, but clearly we show the differences of sort of the legacy and next gen. And in addition to the partnership from a business perspective, ever since we've been onboarded and engaged with the Druva partnership, it's nothing but a white glove services. So from a relationship perspective, our firm feels very comfortable with the dedication that Druva team has given to us for us to understand inside and out about their technology, so we can better serve our partners' customers. From a technology perspective, I think we talk about that. The fact that it's a SaaS applications, right? So there's not a lot of initial fees that investment that we need to incur up front, and also you have the ability to go up and down, right? So sort of utility-based offering, I think that's a great benefit to our customers today.
So that was the CEO's perspective. Vincent, bring in that CIO's perspective. Why Aerosoft on Druva? What's in it for your customers?
Suresh, you want to talk about that from a
Suresh, sorry.
perspective?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Lisa. So outside of the business aspects, right, when we talk about the next gen SaaS platform like Druva, right, the first thing it takes off the plate from the customer is like there is no need to have a thick provision infrastructure. That's rule number one, because it's all on demand. And then ease of implementation and management perspective is pretty straightforward. It's a cookie cutter approach. And the last but not least, security, right? By default, when we onboard a customer from day one, there's a multi-factor authentication involved. And then the 3 components that I talked about, the catalog, which is the metadata for the backups, the deduplication information, and then the backup data, it's all hosted in a much more secured, controlled cloud platform, right? Giving limited access for anybody outside the customer, and also preventing for any kind of manipulation or ransomware attacks infiltrating the backup data. Plus, on top of that, the native intelligence of anomaly detection from Druva provides an insight to the end user, saying, hey, if there is some kind of anomaly detected, Druva can understand it and prevents the data spread, right? So those are the three factors. No need to thick provision any infrastructure. It's on-demand, multi-layered approach of enabling the security, beginning from the multi-factor authentication. You need to have minimum 2 administrators to manage it. The catalog information is spread out, the deduplication information, and the last but not least, none outside the customer will be able to access the data, right? Even the next gen Druva support team, they will not be able to see what data is there. It's completely locked down. Only the customer has access and visibility. That makes the story, fit well from the infrastructure perspective, and also most importantly on the security aspect of the side, because that is very, very vital in the current day with the ransomware attack growing day on day basis. Because backup is the last line of defense. If something goes wrong, I have to rely on my backups.
Backup is the last line of defense. Guys, we're over time, but there's a couple more things I want to get to. So audience, stick with us because I think it's going to be really important for Suresh. Walk us through very briefly. You talked about the complicated recovery process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You gave us that real world customer example. Talk to me about now with Druva. How much more simplified is the ransomware recovery process?
Oh, it's a very straightforward process, Lisa. Like you don't have to go through this whole 7 steps, right? Once they identified that they got hit with the ransomware, they're going to build their control infrastructure. All the end user need to do is like gain back access to the Druva portal. It's that simple. Once that is done, they're going to go through the list of the last good known backups and then validate the control environment, perform a recovery. The reason why? It's already been taken care with a multi-layered difference approach, right? The data is sane, the data is good. Nobody has access to it. You don't have to build infrastructures anymore. You don't have to restore the configuration database. You don't need to worry about the deduplication component. You don't have to worry about the disk target. It's already sitting in the cloud on demand, right? It's a click of the button, identify the target, what you need to restore, set the environment. I would say maybe under 2 hours, you should be able to start the recovery process, release it to the forensic team for them to do their due diligence. So no
Wow,
longer the 3 to 5 business days, right?
Right, from 3 to
Beautiful?
5 business days to a couple of hours is massive difference, and could be the life or death of an organization based on some of those risks that you talked about. Vincent, I want to bring you in for the last time here as we're getting close to 20 minutes here, but I think this is relevant for the audience. What do you say to customers when you're in conversations where they're either sitting on the fence or they're in a status quo situation, given the increased risk and ransomware that we talked about? What do you say to them?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that because we have these candid conversation all the time with our partners and partners customers. So, there was a recent article that I read that the 60% of the business are essentially cease operation after successful ransomware attacks, right? So we all know that it's getting worse. Um, we can no longer afford to have a do nothing approach. If you ask me the same question about 6 7 years ago, ransomware just getting started, we hear news here and there once in a while. That's okay, but backup is your last line of defense. So what the if there's a one message that we, Suresh and myself, can roll this out to the audience and the customer around the world is you can't have a do nothing approach. You cannot have do status quo, approach. Take a look at your backup applications. Have hire a subject matter expert to come in, assess your data protection strategy, and make sure that you remediate your risk. Either optimize your existing environment or take a look at some of the next generation platform. Again, the next generation platform has ability to do utility-based subscriptions, and it doesn't require huge amount of initial investment up front. So do not do nothing because it's not if, it's just when you will get hit. And trust us, we have been into multiple war rooms. In the worst case scenario, you do not want to be in that situation, have no way of recover your most critical assets, which is your digital data.
Great advice. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. We went about 20 minutes, so audience, we gave you a little bit longer time here, but I thought it was really relevant what the guys were talking about today with respect to Arrosoft, challenges with legacy backup, and why they went all in. Arrosoft, that is an MSP on Druva. We appreciate all the comments popping in here. Great to know that we have an audience that is in APAC that is awake right now and watching. We've enjoyed being with you. For my guests, Vincent Chang and Suresh Suseendran, I'm Lisa Martin. You've been watching Druva's LinkedIn Live. We'll be with you next month. See you then. Stay safe.
Thank you.